Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Shine a Light International Women's Month. I'm Cheriece Hilton, and I'm delighted to be joined by Annika. Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries, thank you for being here. So for those that don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I think I'm probably going to start with a slightly different angle on this, because I could talk to you about where I live, the house I've got, etc. I think, given that we're talking about equality, I'll start with the two most important things in my life, which are my young daughters. And when I sit here and talk about what the world could look like, I look at everything through the eyes of what world they'll go into and the opportunities they'll have. And, you know, I hope that for their future, that the conversation we have today really resonates to them, because I worry so much about the world they're stepping into. They're incredibly courageous, strong, and beautiful inside and out. And I hope that they have the opportunity to show that wherever they end up. Alongside that, I have two very important men in my life. My husband, who I'm lucky is very successful in his own right in his career, but sees me as an equal. So we share responsibility, and I think that's incredibly important. And I have a dog called Wilbur. And Wilbur doesn't see any gender, he just sees the hand that feeds him. And so that's the chaos of my life.
It goes where the bed's battered.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you've got a snack, you're his best friend.
I love that. And you mentioned about your daughters and your husband. What sort of world would you like for them? You mentioned that you're really worried about the world that's going on and what the world is that they're going to grow up in. What sort of world, in an ideal situation, would you like for them to grow up in?
I just want them to be in a fair world. That's all I want from them. I want them to, whatever they decide they want to do, I don't want them to have to struggle to do it any more than anyone else. You know, it's just got to be fair. And I think them to have the right to the opportunity and earn their right to the opportunity in the same way as anybody would. That's all I ask for them.
Yeah. So out of interest, how did you get into your role and what was that journey like?
So I started off my career at Universal Pictures many, many years ago. And I started as an account manager there. And then I, through various roles, was headhunted to go across to 20th Century Fox. And I led the sales, marketing, and eventually commercial business there. Best years of my life. Absolutely loved it. I loved the fact that we were moving the consumer from a physical space, which is DVDs, and you probably don't even know what half these things are. Too young, I'm old.
I still remember.
Into digital. So how we transitioned the customer from physical discs into a digital space, and how we took the customer on the journey. And that was probably my first insight into being really customer centric. So making sure we understood the behaviors around how customers operate, how we really channeled into their wants, needs, and desires. And that's really guided me through the rest of my career. As you probably are aware, that Walt Disney Company bought 20th Century Fox in the biggest worldwide acquisition. So myself and a number of us transferred over to Disney and I particularly worked on Disney Plus launch. Following that, if I'm being totally honest with you, I was like, it's time to do something different. And so at that point, I had a phone call from 3 to come across and work on basically their B2B business and then their B2C business. And it was about how do we change and adapt the brand as it was growing up into a new space. And then I got a phone call from the lovely Connor Pierce, and he said to me, do you know what, we're starting up this thing called OMNI Channel. Would you like to get involved? And I was like, you don't often get a phone call that's that exciting, which is like, how do we bring all these amazing divisions, this amazing business and these divisions together under the OMNI Channel umbrella? Most importantly to me, the consumer at the center of that. And that led me to Samsung. And since being at Samsung, actually the next iteration of that is let's connect the marketing journey and the OMNI Channel journey together. So I'm delighted that I'm leading an incredible team of people right now, all around how do we change and adapt around the consumer so that we can bring all of our products together in the most customer-centric way.
Amazing. And in terms of the theme for International Women's Day, it's Break the Bias. You mentioned about opportunity. What is your earliest memory of bias, and what do you think would resonate with your young daughters in terms of breaking that bias?
So my earliest memory of bias would be I was 28 years old and I was lucky to be made sales director at 20th Century Fox. I worked for 20th Century Fox at the time. And I was the first sales director, female sales director, in a very male pre-Weinstein environment. And I remember I got this job, I was really excited, and I was like, I'm young, I've got to make this work. And I went to my first cross-studio meeting. And in the cross-studio meeting, it was all men, first of all, and they were all quite a number of years older than me. And the first meeting, someone said, "Oh, Annika, can you take the notes?" I thought, "Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'm new, fine, I'll take the notes." And then a month later, I went back to the same meeting and they said, "Oh, Annika, can you take the notes?" And I thought, I remember thinking to myself, this isn't right. And so I said, "Why, have you not got a pen?" And literally, as the words came out of my mouth, I thought, "Oh," and I watched the room almost stopped at that point, because I just made a statement in a very collaborative way, but it was, this stops here. And so for me, I hope that they're not sat in a room full of just men, and I don't think that's the case anymore. And I hope they've got I hope that anyone has the voice and the security in themselves to ask the question back without being confrontational necessarily. So I hope for them, they don't have to face that sort of environment.
I want to stay there a little bit, actually, because I want to understand a little bit more about what the atmosphere was like when you said that comment. What was the reaction? Do you remember? Yeah,
I remember. I can feel the environment right now. It was, I think they were quite shocked, first of all, that firstly, there was not just a gender issue in the room, but there was also just an age issue. I was a lot younger, and it was someone having a voice and doing it in a way that wasn't confrontational, but it was indirectly saying, "This stops."
Yeah.
And after that, I never got asked to do the notes. And actually, years later, as these people, they agree to be friends and everything else, people sort of go back to that moment, like, I got called the Bizonator. My surname's Bizon, so it's like, don't ask her. The Bizonator won't give you a pen. We'll always offer you a pen. It was a moment in my life which I thought, do you know what? If you don't stand up for yourself, sometimes no one will. And I would have ended up taking the notes, and I'm terrible at note taking anyway. But I'd have ended up taking the notes at every single meeting, and that would have bled further into how I operated.
Absolutely. On that topic then, what do you think needs to be done on a corporate level in terms of championing gender equality and breaking the gender bias?
I think there are a few things. I think, first of all, I don't know if you've read Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. I think it's a really fascinating way of looking at the world. And she did a podcast, I think it was like 2010, and it was all around 3 different principles. Firstly, have a seat at the table and own the seat at the table. And, I won't go into loads of detail around it, but it was about thinking you deserve to be there and really understand, women naturally don't always think they deserve to have that seat at the table. Own it and don't let someone else sit there because you haven't got the confidence to step into that space. The second one is make your partner your partner. And I think this is so important. Women, you look at all the statistics, women will still, to a point, run the home and have a job, and they're expected to do everything. So unless you take your partner and whatever gender they are, and you agree the rules of play, my husband, openly, if the kids are ill, he has to step up as much as I do. And it's about sharing that responsibility. And I think the third thing is don't leave before you leave. And it's so true. It's like women always men are very, very good at being more spontaneous. Women will always have a plan, and that plan can work against them because they're always thinking of the next thing and they're not living in the moment. And she talks a lot about the fact that, basically you could be planning to have children. Don't stop your career because you're planning to have children, because you've still got to come back and be a badass. So it's like always be thinking about what you're going to do next. And then I relate that back to now and what we need to do. Better recruitment, understanding gender roles within the business, mentoring, training. And actually, I look at my role, I'm lucky to sit in a leadership position in the business. I have a huge responsibility to show people the way and show it can be done, but do it with humility. And I think that would be my view.
Amazing. I think that echoes throughout the whole world, right? We need that. We need that ethos within the company and at the board level.
I think it's really interesting as well. There was one other point that when I talk about, because it really resonated to me, I read Lean In, I some of it I agreed with, some of it I didn't, but I thought there was one thing she talked about, and she talked about, they did a study in Harvard Business School, and it was a lady, and I'll probably get the name wrong, so bear with me on this. I think her name was, let's say Harriet for the sake of argument, Harriet. And she basically went from an operator to a board director within a venture capitalist company. And they did a study on her through, I think it was Columbus University, but basically they took 2 groups of people and they gave They gave exactly the same history of what that person had done, how she'd got through her career. They changed one thing in it, and that was the name from, let's say, Harriet to Howard. And then they asked people what they thought about this. And when it was Howard, it was like, Howard's they both agreed that the person could do the job the same way. Howard was the guy you want to go to the pub with, trust him, really, really good guy. Harriet, the one name change, not sure about her. Yeah. And I think that to me is the core issue.
They shouldn't be discriminated against.
Well, I just found it really interesting that it's like such a small thing. It's just perception is reality, right? And so how we help champion that through integrity and just doing a good job.
Massively. Huge. And it's key that you touch on that word perception, because I think changing someone's perception changes their perspective. Yeah. And that changes everything.
I think also, you know what, don't be afraid. It's the fear factor. I think women, and I'll speak to myself, we all have imposter syndrome where you sort of think, oh, am I meant to be here? Do I deserve to be here? Yeah, you do. And you know what, you're going to make mistakes. Doesn't matter what gender you are. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has great moments. It's embracing that and seeing that as a strength versus, and I think we've got a job to do to not make people feel isolated in that imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And also it's about embracing that level of discomfort as well. Yeah. I think people fear it, right? They're like, oh my God, no, absolutely not. I'm not comfortable here. And it's about embracing that.
Totally
and saying,
agree.
You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine with it, you know? Thank you for sharing that. It was really insightful. Shining a light on our experiences as women also means celebrating our successes as well. So what empowering moments have you had throughout your career? Or in life, anything?
I think if I go back to that day when I was sat as a young sales director, and you know, I did sales marketing and ended up doing commercial work within 20th Century Fox. The big thing that stood out to me at that point was we were number 4 in the market, had a team that was quite dysfunctional, if I'm being honest, and we had to transition our business from physical to digital. And there were so many barriers of so many things that everyone said couldn't be done. We couldn't change consumer perception. And I look back on the point where we actually hit number 1 market share, but that wasn't the point. It was the team that was built around that. And I looked at the team and it was like, I've got the best people. We've achieved the results by all pointing in the same direction. And we were kind of like almost a family in thinking. It was like everyone was really together. And I was so proud, you know, and there's loads of examples I can give you that are personal examples. That was one of those moments where I thought I've brought a team together and we're nailing it. And I just was so proud of everybody. And I was so proud of watching people really celebrate success and feel from where we'd come from to where we got to. And there were some really rocky times in that. But as a group, we came together, and that I got a lot of energy from that.
Amazing. And it's true, you surround yourself with people who you want to emulate and who want to emulate you as well, and that level of energy, right? You're all working towards that same goal.
And I think that's the thing, is like sometimes people talk about what's your great moment. My great moment was about the fact that I knew I couldn't do it on my own. So it was like bringing the best people together, us all being and actually having some fun. And that we had some really rocky times, and you know, it was really shitty times. But the point was, actually, we laughed about it, and it wasn't serious. It was like, yeah, we're having a bad time. What do we do next? How do we pivot? And it was always this like energy that sort of flowed through the team that I loved.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we're going to end up with some quick fire questions.
Yep.
So the first one is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I would give my younger self, I'd say, you know, seriously, don't drink too much. No, I would say my honest advice would be, don't lose your creativity and your questioning as you go through your career. Do something you love, because you'll always do it better. And don't take yourself too seriously. You know, learn to laugh at your mistakes and just we're humans, right? And sometimes people think the further you go in your career, the more serious you've got to be. And actually, I don't believe that.
Interesting. Love that. Okay, number 2, what advice would you give to any women or young girls looking to get into your role?
I think I'd say all the same things. It's like, do you know what? Keep the creativity will always carry you through, as long as it's based in logic. So, you know, we're all going to have moments where you feel like you might have failed or you've got imposter syndrome. Just, you know, reach out, find people, whether it be a mentor, whether it be someone you trust, just to put you back on the right track when you suddenly go off track slightly, and keep going because you'll get there, you know. And actually, I look at some of the failings, the things that I've done wrong in my career, and they've been the biggest learnings for me, because I take them with me, and I can understand how someone else might feel really, really lost in that space. You know, if you're in a position where you've been through it, take somebody with you, and as a person, reach out for those people just to set you back on the right track.
And do you have any role models that you look up to?
I'm not massively into role models, male or female, because there is, and this is probably coming from my media background, there's one person that I think is just, I go back to being a badass. I think it's Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Now, the reason I think she's awesome is I love I love what she stands for, which is she's shown her creativity. I thought the way that she let women speak through Fleabag was just incredible, because she took something, brought humour to it, but also brought a different dimension to what a woman, the stereotypes of what a woman should be. I also thought Killing Eve, as to write and produce that, she took the Tomb Raider style of an assassin and, you know, binned all those sort of gender profiles and put her in awesome fashion, and just made it really cool, really edgy, but intellectual. And I love that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your insights. I think it's been a great conversation to have. We're really highlighting things that need to change as well throughout the world, but also at a corporate level. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for joining us in episode 5 of Shine a Light International Women's Month. I'm Cheriece Hilton, and I'm delighted to have been joined by Annika. Don't forget to check out episode 6, which is the last and final episode.